This is Talk Over Tea,
a place for a casual conversation about life in local government.
with Kassandra
and Claudel Frederic.
elected officials from the city of Amesbury, Massachusetts.
Relax with us for a moment. The tea is hot.
Hey, Claudel.
What's up?
How are you today?
It's beautiful outside, so
is.
I am definitely doing well.
Fantastic.
And yes,
Well, it's good to be back for more Talk Over Tea.
we are back.
I think we have a lot to talk about today. But first, I thought we should talk about our mugs.
Okay, let's talk about our mugs. First,
Tell me
my
about your mug.
Pact. Shout out to Pact.
What's packed?
It's a coalition in our city here in Amesbury. We work with the young teens, and they're able to basically voice their feelings and insights on things that are happening around us.
Yeah,
It's great.
that's awesome. I love
What
your
you
mug.
got?
That's why I asked, because I love it. You have your packed mug. I have a Munters mug. Munters is our largest employer in Amesbury, and they are building a new facility. They're expanding.
Yeah.
And going to be hiring more people and moving to a new site within our city. So there's a lot going on over at Munters, and they provided me with a new Yeti this year. So
Awesome. And that
Yeah.
Munters building is coming out phenomenal.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
huge. It's over 400,000 square feet, which is just overwhelming to see from the ground and watch it all come to life. But
That's like
it's,
quadruple the size of the last one, right?
yeah, they have like 130,000 square feet now on the other side of town. So yeah, they're multiplying in space, adding employees, and moving to the other side of town.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I don't want us to get lost in this topic of Munters, but what is it that Munters does?
Munters is a temperature control company. They dry the air. They're in humidity control, so they have a role to play in a lot of the things that we interact with. They work with pharmaceuticals, food companies. They also work with the companies that produce lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. So they are very much behind the scenes, but impact our daily lives in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
like they'll be here for quite some time. That's good stuff.
Yeah,
All
they've
right.
been here for generations, and hopefully more to come. So
All
yeah,
right.
so that's our mugs for today.
Well, let's toast to that.
Yeah, here we go. We're here for more tea. So
All right.
so last time we were here, we talked about where we came from before we ran for office, what our backgrounds are, and we were talking a lot about real estate because we have that in common. And I thought today we would dive a little bit more into our local government as it relates to the way people decide where to live. So when you're looking for a place to live, what do you feel like people are talking about these days and how they're making that decision? And then maybe what they're not thinking about, but should be, things that they should be looking at. And we can kind of dive into that, and that will, I'm sure, get us into lots of different topics. But being in the position that I'm in now, and I'm sure as you are getting, you're comfortable in council, you're learning a lot more about
Learning so much.
what's going on with our city and things that you don't really otherwise look into or learn about until you get more involved. But maybe would be more helpful if you knew before you chose to buy your house or settle down. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, with that being said, I mean, one of the topics that I'm literally just coming out of my first budget season or session, basically with budget being behind us now. And it was a lot of information, and I felt like there is definitely a lot of topics or even subtopics that the community should kind of understand more about.
Yeah.
I would say one of those things for me would be literally like everybody talks about this new growth. And kind of to like a segue for real estate, like I want to know, like, what's this new growth mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure we can talk about the budget for many episodes.
Yeah.
But a budget's really important for people to understand. New growth is part of our revenue, and new growth is calculated into the revenue based on additions, renovations, changes that people are making to their property. Some communities have a lot of new growth, some don't have a lot of new growth, and it can be just new developments too. So you could take sort of, we'll call it virgin land, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a field, someone builds a new building, so you've improved the property value. So we generate our taxes based on your property value. And knowing what all of our properties in town are worth is really important to that calculation.
Yeah.
And for us to raise more money or to redistribute that burden, we want all of the values in town to be worth more, or to take a property that is, it's going to be worth something as a field. It's going to be worth more as a multi-story building, right? So that growth, that change in value really makes a difference to our tax calculation. And we want to generate a lot of new growth, as much new growth as we can every year, because it helps improve that tax base. So you'll hear people talk about needing more businesses to improve our tax base. That's kind of what most people are familiar with. Like, well, we need more businesses because we need more tax. We need to, we need more taxes. It helps reduce the burden on our residential taxpayers. But it's not always just businesses, because that new growth is, like I said, anyone making any addition or improvement to their property, or any new development that goes in. So taking for instance, in Amesbury, this year we had a former car dealership that was, probably worth, we'll say maybe $1 million as is, but it was vacant, dilapidated, and it was on a pretty big parcel. And someone bought it, took down the old car dealership, and now they're putting in 10 condo townhouse style units.
Correct.
So it's going to be worth more than $1 million now, right? So that improves, it affects our new growth number, because that's a lot of new growth. And overall, it's going to improve that property value, which is going to help with the distribution of our taxes.
Got it.
So that new growth number is it's really important. And you can look at that number in your community's budget books, which is, that Bible you're living by right now. And you can find that new growth number. And a lot of times folks compare their tax bill to a neighboring community. Maybe you're looking for a place to live and you're comparing communities, and the tax bills are much different between those. And it could be simply because of new growth. We have a neighboring community that has they have almost double our new growth, and maybe even more, on a regular annual basis, because of what people are putting into their property. They have a larger industrial park. It's just a different community, and the value, if someone puts an addition on their home over there, or if they put in a new kitchen, it just changes their value more dramatically than it does here.
Right.
So their new growth number is always a lot higher than ours.
Yeah.
So that new growth, that number matters a lot, and it's something we really pay attention to.
As we should.
Yeah. So new growth, that's a good one. That's a good, I don't think people, look very much at their city budgets, but I'm certain they don't really look into what new growth is. But yeah, thinking of budgets, and somebody's looking for a place, this is something I was thinking of, like when you're looking at buying a condo, you typically ask for their budgets, right? You ask for the condo association budgets for, I don't know, the last couple of years.
You want to know how much they have in reserves.
Right. You look for like the last 2 years of budgets. Exactly. You want the copies of all their meetings. You want to know how it's run, what you're getting for your condo fee that you're paying, who's going to shovel how much and where they're going to plow. And do you have to shovel your own driveway or your own steps? And you want to know everything. But when you buy a house and you're paying taxes, which if you were buying a condo, you're going to pay taxes too, but kind of relate that to buying a house and you're paying taxes. No one really does that much research on well, what am I getting for my taxes, right? How, do I live on a public street or a private street? What's in the budget that's going to pay for, X, Y, and Z? Are you going to pick up my trash? You're not going to pick up my trash.
Right.
So it's all of those things that if you think about when you're buying a condo, you really should look into the same types of things.
Yeah. To your point,
what's in that budget?
I don't think a lot of people even realize that there's a difference between a street being public or private. They don't realize that, my street being private doesn't mean that my trash gets picked up, just like my neighbor's trash gets picked up on this street like 3 streets over.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I
a
mean?
good one.
Yeah, so
That comes up all the time.
so prior to me getting on, I've seen it being, when I say getting onto council, I seen that being a topic and being an issue where people were living on a private way, and there was issues. They wanted their street to become public. I mean, people don't think about these things beforehand.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about public and private roads. Part of the problem is that people just assume they're on a public street. Realtors assume that the street is public.
Right.
They see people driving on it. And there's sort of an uncertainty of like who's plowing the street, who's picking up the trash, stuff like that. But by law, we cannot spend public funds on private property.
Right.
So our public funds are the money you pay in taxes. We can't then go spend that on private property, which would be, paving your private road, plowing your private road, picking up your trash on a private road. We can't actually do that.
Yeah.
So there's a whole process to go through for us to decide on whether your road should be public, and what resources to provide for you. And if you're building a new road and you want it to be public, you have to build it to certain specifications because we want to make sure that that infrastructure holds up and that it is going to be something we can maintain once we take ownership of it. So one of the problems we run into are these older roads, right? They've been around for a long time and people assume that they're public, and we don't really know what the infrastructure is like below the surface. So we call it sort of subsurface infrastructure, like, again, this how the road was actually built, but then also all of the any culverts or utilities or anything below the road, how it was really installed, and whether it's going to be something we can afford to maintain if it was put in decades ago. So for us to assume the responsibility for that is a big deal.
Right.
And without, the developer around who put it in 20 and 30, 40 years ago, we can't really make an educated decision on that. Right. So we get into really sticky situations where people think, I pay taxes and you should pick up my trash and, you should pave my street. But we have to have a formal vote by the council or the select board to accept that street and make it public before we can spend money on it.
Yeah.
And so if you're buying a house and you're not sure that it's public, a lot of times it happens with, again, sort of a development that is
like
maybe it's a cul-de-sac, maybe it's a dead end, things like that. Obviously not, if you live on Route 110 or Route 150, that's public. So little side roads, do your research.
Yeah, I agree.
Look that up.
Yeah.
You want to find the vote from the council 100%. Or a published list by your city or town that says it has been adopted and is public. And here's the other thing that connects to your budget. We use that list to qualify for our Chapter 90 funds. So the state funding for us to improve our roads and sidewalks in Massachusetts, it's called Chapter 90. And they use a formula that is based partially on your miles of roadway. So we want to get credit for all of the miles of road we have. And we also only want to put that money towards the mileage of roads that are ours. Right. So those numbers need to be validated.
Yeah.
And
need to make sure you get the bang for the buck.
Yeah. So that matters too.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow, that is huge. So another resource, since we're in this right now, another resource as a realtor and other realtors might use that I didn't realize, like I just took it for granted, was the GIS map. I love
the GIS map.
It's amazing.
I'm such a dork, but
it's amazing. But I didn't realize the cost of the GIS map for the city itself.
Yeah.
Like
it's not free.
It's not free.
No.
But it's literally something that we could just go to and access it and get all, like not all, but a lot of resources for our clients on these properties.
Yeah.
And I don't know if all realtors use it, but I feel like they should.
It? That's awesome.
You know what I mean? And, this is where you get your plots sometimes. Like you could see the square footage of the house, the basement, unfinished spaces. Like there's a lot, permits that are open or not open. Like this is such a beautiful tool.
Yeah.
But it's not free.
It's not free. No, it's not free. Nothing's free.
Nothing's free.
No. So, so most cities and towns will have some sort of a GIS system. Ours is done through our regional planning agency, the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. And so we pay them. So they provide the service. They upload the maps. They do the flyovers. And, it's all sort of generated from between flyovers and satellites. And so it's not perfect. You might find that it looks like a shed is over a property line.
Right.
It might not really be over the property line, but the lines are close enough. So it's a really good place to start, to look at that map and to see, what's going on out there. You can put on different layers. There's topography, there's wetlands, there's, we can actually log in and see more than you can, but as a realtor or your clients, they can look at it too. Yep. So we can log in, we can get street view, we can see where our utilities are. So we've had people call and say, I have a catch basin and it's on my property. And so I can actually pull up and see where the drainage lines are. I can see where the fire hydrants are. I can see a lot more than you can.
I need a login.
So we keep those very close to the vest.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of information in there. And the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, they'll map almost anything if we send it to them and say, we really want to be able to see this. It just keeps adding layers and you can toggle all of them on and off. So yeah, that's really important too. I've had, I don't know why, but I'm gonna keep relating this to real estate. I just think it's a relatable way for people to think about what they should know before they, buy a property. It's a good way to think about how you learn more about your community. So I've had some people come to us and they live at the end of a street. It's a dead end road and they're not sure sort of like where the property line is, right? So we have a lot of roads that are not, we didn't really build the end of the road. So it's like a paper road at the end. Yeah. So residents who live there, they sort of creep onto public property and then say something like, decide to put up a fence. And then we plow to the end of the road and we push the snow and we damage the fence. But that fence was on our property. So things start to get a little bit muddy in certain areas. So depending on where you're buying, your property line may or may not be very clear to you, right? My neighborhood, we all have little postage stamp lots. My fences were already there when I bought. I don't really have any questions about that. But depending on where you're looking, you might want to just look at that map and get a better sense of it. Now, of course, when you buy a house, you get a mortgage. If someone's going to survey your property and, you're going to have that in the file. But who really looks that closely at that? Yeah. Right?
They're just excited to get into the house at that point.
They just found a place to live. Right. So that map, that GIS map is helpful just to get a sense of what's going on around you, who owns the abutting property. Maybe the property behind you is a beautiful forest and you think, oh, this is great. I'm going to have a great view. And then you find out 15 years later, it's going to be developed. And you thought that would never be developed. Well, if you look at who owns it, see if it's privately owned and not protected, so you can look at what the zoning is and protections. Well, you could see that would have always been a possibility for it to be developed. Right. So those things are really they're just really helpful tools. And yeah, we do pay for that service, so that it's available. But the public and everyone can use it. And as a realtor, you learn those tools of what's out there. Oh, it's the Registry of Deeds, the GIS. It goes on. There's the assessor's database. You can see everyone who's owned that property, what they've paid for it. Yeah. Or even what the city pays to. For title, like to register titles. Like it's expensive. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's upwards of $600 is what Amesbury pays. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's expensive. Everything costs a little bit of money. Yeah. Yeah. We pay the same recording fees every time we file something that requires a recording, which is quite often. We pay the same recording fees that, you guys do for real estate transactions. It differs depending on the transaction, but we pay all of those fees too. Yeah. It's a lot, but look how far we've gotten just by mentioning new growth. Right? New growth, that's an important term. Yeah, right? So that definitely is a big term. Yeah, but I have another one. Okay, I don't know how deep it's going. to take us. Right. So I know we have a couple different, let me say, accounts. Basically, we have an enterprise account. So there's enterprise accounts. So enterprise accounts are meant to be sort of self-sufficient.
Correct.
Right. So our enterprise accounts are for our water and sewer department predominantly. We have a few. We may have a few other small ones, but predominantly water and sewer. So in Amesbury, we run our own utilities. That's not the case in every community. Some communities outsource that, and some don't have that. So they don't have those services. I was at a meeting recently with a community from the Cape, and they have town water, but they don't have town sewer. So it just depends on where you live. So we have local water and sewer. We have our own plants, we have our own staff, and we run the utilities independently. So we have ratepayers. So that it's usually a taxpayer too. So if you own your property and you're getting those services, you can turn the water on, and then you run it and then you flush it, right? So it comes in, goes out. You have a meter on the house, and we can check that meter and we bill you. So you pay a bill for those utilities, and that goes directly into an enterprise fund, and the enterprise fund supports all of the work associated with delivering those services. So it pays for the staff, it pays for the plant, it pays for the chemicals, it pays for the equipment, it pays for the staff's benefits. It's completely independent.
So separate from our operating budget.
Right.
So we have an operating budget, we have the enterprise.
Yep.
What other accounts do we have? Or we have a lot, but
the types of accounts.
The types, yeah.
Yeah, so you have your general fund or operating budget, and that is the sort of like taxpayer supported budget, you could call it. And then within that, we have reserve accounts, which is like a savings account, and they're referred to in different ways. So you have reserve, stabilization, and free cash are all sort of savings. You could call it all savings. And they're certified by the state at sort of as one, they add them all up basically. And that's your rainy day fund. They're sort of one-time funds. They should be used for one-time expenses. There's a general best practice that the total of those accounts should be 5 to 10% of your operating budget.
And now you mentioned free cash.
I did. It's not free. It's the worst name.
Let's kind of.
Can we come up with a new one?
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. Free cash is not free cash.
It's not free cash.
We can't just use it however we want.
Yeah, it's not like petty
want.
cash. It shouldn't be treated like petty cash.
So let's chat about free cash a little bit.
Okay, so free cash, it does count towards our stabilization and sort of reserve accounts, like a rainy day account. It should be used for unexpected one-time expenses. So that's how you withdraw from free cash, or why you would withdraw from free cash. But how you build your free cash is based on how you close out your fiscal year budget. So at the end of the year, you'll have a balance in your account, just like anybody at home. So maybe you budgeted for something that you thought was going to cost $1,000 for the month, but it only cost $800. So you have a budget surplus. You have an extra $200. Maybe you thought that you were going to work 8 hours at your part-time job, but you worked 10. So now you have a revenue surplus. So free cash is the collection of those two things. So at the end of the month, you could have a little bit of both.
Right.
And that's what that is for us. At the end of the fiscal year, if we have any revenue that came in higher than we expected, or we spent less than we budgeted, those together result in this surplus at the end of the year.
And this could carry on to each year, right?
And then it sits in the account and it carries forward.
Okay.
It also could be, there's other things that could go into that account at the end of the year. It could be one-time revenue that you don't budget for. So there's money we get on an annual basis, that we can't really predict. 1 year after the pandemic, we got they called it like a health insurance holiday. So there were not a lot of claims. People couldn't go to the hospital. Health insurance companies had surpluses. They were trying to pay those down, and they gave us a whole month off of having to pay our premiums. So we had, that was a few $100,000 in excess that we didn't have to pay. So that became free cash. That was excess for us. So we wouldn't have been able to predict that. just in the last few years, rates are high, interest rates are high. And so we're earning more in returns from what we have in the bank than we would have predicted. Sure. And so we wouldn't budget for that either. And our revenues are certified by the state. So we can't just say, well, it looks like revenues are going to be, it looks like the rates are going to be high, so we're going to jack that number up. Right. The state would say, no, I don't think so. Right? Yeah. So they want you to be predicting things on a relatively stable basis. If you predict that your revenues are going to be higher than last year, they ask a lot of questions. You have to justify it and send letters in. So really, we pretty much, budget sort of stable revenue. And so unless we have historical increases to justify that revenue is going up, and we can include that.
Got it. So on the opposite end too, you cannot just budget low purposely or anything like that, right, just so you can have an excess on the other end. Right. Because the state will definitely monitor something like that.
Yeah, the state's reviewing everything. Yeah, so. And that wouldn't do us any good either, because if we don't budget properly for revenue, then we can't spend it.
Right.
So, and we certainly have the expenses to,
What would be the case in that? Like, say if, you're under budget, and at this point you've already burned through your entire budget like a department. At that point, what do you do? What does that department do?
So if we're going to use small numbers again because it's easy. So if they budgeted $1,000 and they've spent $1,200, what do they do?
Yeah.
So it depends on where we are in the fiscal year. And it depends on what they spent it on or what it's for to some extent. So what we do, and you'll see this soon as we kind of wrap up this fiscal year, at the end of the year, we have some departments who do go over like that, and we have some who are under. Yeah. And so we will do interdepartmental transfers, and they'll balance each other out.
Got it.
So we track as we go along in the year. We usually wait till we get, we can get about 6 months in before we start to see those pop up, where we can see that this department's going to be under and this one's going to be a little bit over. And so then we start a list and we can track those transfers. Like historically, the last couple of years, our Veteran Services Office has been under. Unfortunately, we're losing a lot of our veterans, and we budget for their benefits. And so if we have less veterans to pay out benefits to, then they come in under budget. Typically, the last 4 years, I've always seen them under budget. So we know we have that money available to transfer over to other departments. And so we do that and sort of reconcile and balance everything out by the end of the year.
Got it. So every city obviously has a different budget that they're working with.
Yep.
Or municipality. So Amesbury, I believe our current budget is about 80 million, correct?
It's about 80 million all in. And I think that includes, I don't think it does. I was going to say I think it includes our enterprise funds, but I don't think it does. Okay. I think it's the operating budget. It's about, we're about 80 million.
So the operating budget is about 80 million.
Yeah.
So good practice is to keep at least 5% of that for free cash, right?
Yep. Okay. In stabilization funds.
And stabilization
which is a total of those reserve stabilization free cash accounts. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. And just so everybody's kind of knowing what's going on here, of this 80 million that we have this budget for, to go back to why you want to kind of know where you're going to live.
Yeah.
What's the percent? About
5 to 10%?
No. The budget of the school.
Oh, yeah.
Our school is about 50%.
Almost, yeah.
About 50% of the city's budget for Amesbury.
Yeah.
For Amesbury. And every municipality
it's usually around 50.
It's about that, right?
You'll find communities where it's almost 60 and it's maybe more like 45. It's always about half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
From what I've seen.
But I feel like things like that is important to know, kind of like where the money's being allocated to. Everybody's paying taxes. Right. You want to know where the money's going to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People like, oh, is there a new school being built? Blah, blah, blah. We've had that here. Yeah. So I think those are other things to look into, but I love knowing those numbers.
Yeah. I love that you want to know those numbers.
It's important for us.
Yeah.
And I feel like being a new city councilor, I love this position of learning and kind of bringing everybody on this journey. Yeah. And you could like help us kind of get through this, like really understanding local government.
Yeah.
It could be intimidating.
Yes, I'm sure.
But it could be, but what I've found.
This might be the episode where we lose them.
Right. No way. As a matter of fact, budget season is what made me even more intrigued, like kind of seeing all the things that go into like running a city.
Yeah, this is really the heart of it, right? I mean, your budget tells the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome. So we've talked about new growth, which is how you're growing, right? If you're not growing, you're dying. Mm-hmm. We've talked about the stabilization and sort of, savings account, which is how you are, that's your resilience, right? That's how you are able to respond to unexpected costs and things that break, pandemics, things that come up where that is your, right, like that's your safety net. That's how you are able to respond. So then you've got the schools, right? Like what percentage of your budget goes to which departments, and that reflects your city too, your aging population, what's going to your council on aging, what's going to your students, your social services. We have a lot of young families, and a lot of them use our library. So what's going on at our library? A lot of people talk about streets and sidewalks. Like what they do talk about when they go to look for a house is potholes.
Yes.
So streets and sidewalks and our public works, we can talk more about that.
We can't talk about all this.
No, so this is what I'm saying. So we're gonna wrap this up, but those are all things we can dive more into, and we'll think of more too. But I think we covered the basics, right? How you grow and how you bounce back,
right?
And then like where does all of this money go? And questions you should ask, things you should be kind of poking into, what you want to learn about. It's not just what day your trash gets picked up, but maybe more about how your trash gets picked up and where the money comes from, all that, because every town is different, even for trash. Yeah. And
lastly, I feel like is kind of what is the actual plan for the city's future. I don't know. I can't speak for every city or community, but is this community that you want to move into, do they actually have a plan in place for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
I think that's very important, because if you're not moving to a community that has that, I feel like that's a big hole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'll add to that. And do they have the staff to support it and make it happen? Because our municipal staff are just really incredible. And I think they're really, I don't want to say underappreciated, but I think that it's overlooked how much they do. And so many of them live in our community and have dedicated decades of expertise to making this all happen. And we kind of take that for granted, right? That they're all here. They've done this forever. They've got a lot of knowledge, but a lot of them are retiring, and it's hard to recruit and hire new people. People don't really think about municipal jobs anymore. So maybe this will inspire some people. But yeah, I think that those two things are really important. So so we have more to talk about, but I think that if we didn't lose them yet, they'll come back for more. And this was great. This is a good start. This will lead us into many more conversations about getting to know your community. Well,
cheers to everybody that's helping run this awesome little city.
You too, you being part of it. So thanks a lot. We'll come back for more.